stopped John Kerry from bringing an overt Castro sympathizer to the State Department and putting him in charge of our Cuban policy. That's what we'll talk about in today's video. One of John Kerry's closest Confederates is a guy named Fulton Armstrong, who served for years as his assistant for Cuban and Latin American relations on the Senate staff of the Foreign Policy Committee. And it is very likely that Kerry, as Secretary of State, will ask Armstrong to move into the State Department and put him in charge of Cuban affairs. We can't let that happen. This guy is an overt Castro sympathizer who has shown repeatedly his opposition to the cause of freedom in Cuba. Norman Bailey, who until 2007 was issue manager for Cuba, Venezuela in the Office of the Director of Central Intelligence, said that that Armstrong was a vigorous supporter of Castro within the intelligence community. And former Assistant Undersecretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs, Roger Noriega, no relation to the Panamanian dictator, added that Fulton Armstrong's advocacy, that's his word, on behalf of Castro was so astonishing that he banned him from his office. "I didn't question his patriotism, I questioned his judgment," Noriega said. "So I told my assistant that I did not want to see a single scrap of paper that he had anything to do with." And when John Bolton was up for confirmation as the UN ambassador, Bolton said that there was evidence that Castro was amassing biological weapons for use against the United States, and he moved to declassify the report and release it to the public. And Fulton Armstrong opposed that and largely killed the effort to declassify, and was heavily involved in rejecting Bolton's nomination to be ambassador to the United Nations. But the most damning episode concerning Fulton Armstrong took place in 1998 when he collaborated with a woman named Ana Belén Montes, M-O-N-T-S, on a report about the military implications of Castro's Cuba. And the report said that it no longer posed a security threat to the United States, and that based on that, we should change our policy toward Cuba and move toward accommodation with the Castros. Well, 3 years after he co-authored that report with Montes, she was arrested, tried, and convicted of being a spy for Castro, and is currently serving 20 years in a federal penitentiary. And yet, Armstrong has never disavowed the work, and it still serves as the basis of our military intelligence estimate about Cuban capabilities in the defense sector. Now, we face a real opportunity and a real threat in our dealings with Cuba. There is a young, new, vibrant, insurgent movement sweeping the island. It's not reported in the liberal American media, but last week hundreds of Cuban writers and poets took to the streets to demonstrate against Castro. Each month, 400 or 500 people are arrested by Castro's police and sentenced to prison. I recently met with a young man who was just released after 8 years in prison, in which he was tortured and almost died. Each weekend, there are musicians all over Cuba who go to town parks and sing songs knocking Castro. And it's a movement that is increasingly sweeping the island. And as Fidel and Raul near their death, they're not immortal, thank God. Raul is actually sick at the moment with hepatitis and may even predecease Fidel. The movement is for Castro's daughter to become the new dictator. They call it the North Korean model. You know, when Kim Jong-il keeps putting up his son and grandson and so on, and they keep succeeding each other as a hereditary dynasty. We have to stop that. We have to get behind the democratic forces in Cuba. If we let that dictatorship prevail, it'll become a base for terrorism, for Al-Qaeda, for Iran, just like Venezuela is doing under Chavez. So please sign the attached petition. Kerry is coming up for his confirmation hearings in the next week. We want the conservative Republicans on that committee, who include Marco Rubio, by the way, and some of the Democrats of Cuban descent, like Menendez, who probably will be the incoming chairman of the committee, to question Kerry closely about Fulton Armstrong and make clear that it would be unacceptable to put him in charge of U.S.-Cuban relations. So sign the attached petition and tell him how you feel. Thanks a lot.